Welcome back, Freelancers. I'm Defeated Rescue, and we're continuing with the Gear Showcase series. We're back in the storm today, hanging out in the launch bay, but we'll head out in the Bastion and showcase some gear. Okay, so we are on the last piece of gear for the focus seals on the storm, and we're going over Steam Vent. Steam Vent is the Cataclysm version of Black Ice. It's upgraded Glacial Sphere, combo effect is chain, and then it deals both it deals both ice and fire damage. It is a detonator. It does 3,500 damage approximately, has a recharge of 5, and then it has a fire effect of 20. So, just a quick comparison between Black Ice. The difference here really is just that it has a so Black Ice initial damage is ice damage, so it freezes targets on hit, and then with Steam Vent it actually does fire and ice damage, but it's got fire effect of 20, so it should prime the enemy. There's been a lot of discussion about Steam Vent and how it has like invisible damage bonuses. Basically, what the discussions on the forums and on Reddit and just in general has been is that it does like 4 times damage that actually shows. So I should be doing like 4 times this amount of damage. And then another interesting thing about this, and I've noticed this with other primers and gear, is that because it does fire and ice and fire damage at the same time, it's like it's confusing the enemy's resistance, and therefore it's much easier to take them down because their resistance almost doesn't even account for the damage that you're doing. But we'll go into GM1 and showcase it off there. And then we are in GM1 and we're back in the Necropolis. So Steam Vent is, in my opinion, the most powerful gear the Storm has. Questionable whether or not it's actually the most powerful gear in the game. I think because of its intrinsic ability of confusing the enemy's resistance, that kind of makes it the most powerful, but we'll go in here and kind of show it off. So it charges up like normal Black Ice, and it takes them down pretty easily in GM1. I have 3 gear recharges on this one, so I have no damage or additional damage. But as you can see, it's doing, so this is what you need to really pay attention to. So it does its initial damage, and then it does 2 ice damage, and then a fire damage. Let's see if we can do it to the storm. So there we got 2 ice damage, 2 fire damage. And it's like, the tracking on it's really good. So if you see that yellow number, that is a weak point hit. I'm like aiming at their feet. See, that time I didn't get it. So if I aim really low, you'll see I just get 2 ice numbers and then 2 fire damage numbers. And then supposedly there's damage that's happening there that we're not even seeing. The thing that makes it so powerful is the fact that it also deals with their shields as well as with their health at the same time. So here's an armored enemy. It's doing about the same damage. Yeah, it's doing roughly the same. We'll go ahead and take out the ranger. So see that how like their shield and half their health are down instantly with 1 hit. So there's definitely values here we're not seeing. I expect it to do the exact same thing in GM3 where we're going to be doing a lot of damage. Kind of without seeing a lot of damage numbers. But we'll probably see the exact same damage numbers. We're in GM3. Just so we look at the gear one more time is, so I've got a couple hundred extra charges on it. But yeah, it should only be doing 3,500 damage. But we're seeing, it's almost like it's doing tick damage. So it does initial damage, which is being treated as weak point because it almost always hits a weak point at like about 45, and then it does 2 of ice at about 28, and then looks like 1 or 2 of fire at 28. It's kind of hard to tell because it hits them so quickly, but I mean that's like 8 to 10,000 damage just alone. We'll go in here and see how it works in GM3. I'm anticipating it's going to be pretty good. So it's pretty much doing the exact same thing here, which it shouldn't be, right? So it test against a storm. So here it's significantly weaker against a storm because before it would take down their shield and kill them outright. Now it's only just do it. Now see, because of the way it works, it does set them on fire. It changed all of them to fire effect. But it's still doing pretty aggressive damage. So significantly less there. We were able to take them down pretty easily. And it's also because it takes down their shield and then also applies the fire and ice effect to them as well. So there we go. Because they were resistant, it did give the fire effect to them and it primed them. And then when we detonated them, we were able to chain it to that enemy type next to them. So as you can see with them before they went down, it was like not even a quarter of a second. You can kind of see like they're getting primed with fire. So it looks like what it's doing is it's doing its initial damage, which is kind of about 4,000. And then it's doing both the ice damage, and then it's doing, on the end, it's doing that fire damage. Because you see they're on fire right now. It's like it's detonating itself. Yeah. That was weird. Oh, okay, there it is. So because it's detonating itself, it also chained all the enemy types in there. Now they've all got fire damage on them. So this was really going to shine too against some armored enemies, because armored enemies take more damage from fire. We'll go ahead and clear some of these enemies out and find some armored enemies. Alright, so we got some armored enemies. And it does do more damage to them. It doesn't do enough to take them down in one shot. And unfortunately, because it chained to this enemy, I can't prime them. So it took out a little bit more than half their shield this time. Ooh. And it's not priming them, but they typically do have a higher resistance. But it's still eating away their health really efficiently. So like the way it's reacting is almost like again and again, where it's doing like double the damage against them. As you can see from the values that we can see. It's almost like it's firing both an ice and fire version of black ice at the same time, and that's why they call it steam vent. And even if you look at like the effects of it, it does look significantly different from what black ice looks like. So we'll do a quick comparison. We'll wait to get a charge back, but so like if you look at it, it looks like it's just got that blue effect to it. It's like a bluish and white, but if you go over and look back at steam vent, it almost looks like it's shooting two at once. So you still see that like blue effect, but you see it kind of like with the yellow. It looks like it's like a fire vent, but you can see like a blue aura to it, almost like it's still firing both at a time, and that's what I think is happening. As far as why you can't see all the damage numbers that are happening, because we mowed through GM3 pretty easily. There was no enemy type we came up against that was really a real issue, where with other gear pieces we've come in here and we've had a lot of trouble with just like the Ranger or the Storms. Heck, we even had issues with just some of the grunts on some of the gear that had significantly higher values than what this one does. So that's where it's really interesting. And then you can use, because it is a detonator, you can use like whatever to prime. I didn't really have to do it too much other than when I was doing some like crowd control, but you could go around and just detonate a bunch of enemies with this, getting your ult back really quickly, because it charges really quickly. And it's one of those gear pieces, like, because it's got that charge bar like this where you see where like it's fluctuating, you need to charge it up. But you don't even have to go all the way to the end. Like, you can let off and it kind of auto fills that bar and automatically shoots. And because it's got really good tracking, it's going to track to them really well. But we'll go ahead and do some box checking real quickly. So is it efficient? Well, I mean, so basically, like, I'm going to stand by what I was saying, is it pretty much does 2 types of damage at once. It's doing the fire damage and ice damage, and technically it's doing the initial damage, but it's acting like you're shooting black ice and steam vent at the same time, and that's why it seems like it's so much significantly stronger than black ice. So it's like really, really good at taking down all enemy types. Even on stronghold bosses, you'll see this even will do really good damage. And it's so, like, when the monitor has a fire phase, you would think because this is fire and ice damage, it wouldn't really do all that much because they have fire resistant. But because it intrinsically has that fire and ice kind of going back and forth damage at the same time, it's confusing their resistance, and it does the almost exact same damage it would do on any other phase. So it's like it doesn't even care about resistance, which is pretty powerful on its own, especially against stronghold bosses. So it all fills on its own. It's got really good tracking, and it's got a really low recharge of 5, which is pretty good. I'm going to say it's very efficient. It's not necessarily much crowd control, although you are chaining. So if you can prime an enemy and chain them with this, it will set them all on fire, which would be really good at weakening their overall resistance. And then, so it's definitely efficient. Is it viable? Well, it's a detonator, and essentially it's a primer too, because you can see, like, when we'd hit initial enemies with this, if they were still alive, they would usually get caught on fire because it does fire damage at the end. Because it does initial damage, it's like 2 ice damage, and then 2 fire damage. So then it will actually ignite them on fire, causing them to get procced with fire, which then you can detonate them with steam vent again because it's a detonator. It doesn't really say that in the description, but as we can see from my gameplays, that was definitely happening. We were definitely able to prime targets. So I'm definitely going to call it. And the thing is because it's just not a specific detonator, and it's not locked down to a specific element type, like most of the Storm's gear. It's able to be used in all builds. Like, it doesn't matter if you've got like a fire build or an ice build, because this technically it does both damage, but at the same time it reacts as if it's doing neither. So it's really interesting, and I think it's got a place in a lot of builds. Actually, I can't think of a build that couldn't use this. So I'm going to say that it's definitely viable. And then, is it fun? I think it's fun. I think it's fun to use. It's kind of like its own self-sustaining gear, so you can kind of go into more builds, and it's not too hard to use. It's pretty simple. You just hold it, charge it, point it, and then hit the enemy type. That's it. Not complicated. And its Masterwork perk is always active, as it's just giving multiple types of damage at once. So I think it's fun. And then just some comparisons, because I think I've said this in several of the Focus Seal videos, especially for the detonators, which is really only 10,000 Sun, Black Ice, and then Steam Vent. So Steam Vent is easier to use in 10,000 Sun. 10,000 Sun, if you want to use it as a detonator, you got to charge it up. Same way. All 3 of these have to be charged to be used. But the thing is to get its Masterwork perk, you have to Striker's Wrath. You have to like charge it up and use it 10 times to get the full use out of it, which can be complicated because now you need charges or recharge to get that. And then at the same time, it's like, well, then why are you detonating them if you want the Masterwork perk? It's kind of like a give and take, or like it's like a tug of war between, do you want to get the Masterwork perk, or do you want to just use it as a detonator? And then that kind of changes like what kind of inscriptions you're going to be using. And then with Black Ice, realistically, it's just really good at crowd control. It really doesn't do very good damage, and unfortunately, it's ice, so ice doesn't really have a special effect other than it just freezes enemy types in place. Where with like acid and fire damage, it'll actually increase the weakness of the enemy types, especially on armored enemies. So potentially this one is just being used to freeze enemies, and that's about it. And its initial damage isn't all that great. Whereas with Steam Vent, even though it says it has the same initial damage, as we could see from our numbers, we were getting multiple types of damage pretty much at once, multiplied. And that's just from what we could see. Because there's definitely some damage going on here that we're not seeing from the values that pop up. And then on top of that, when it changed the fire effect to everyone, so it weakens everyone. So that's where it's more powerful than Black Ice, because Black Ice just freezes all the enemies. So I guess if you were more looking for crowd control, Black Ice would be the way to go. But if you just want to do some serious DPS, and even then, like, freezing enemies it isn't all that useful all the time. It's really only useful if you're going solo and you're trying to do like a speed run or something, and you don't want to get constantly pinged with like the grunts shots or anything. And even then, like, I think I would rather just set them all on fire with a chain combo than freeze them all with a chain combo. Because this one, also does for its Masterwork perk is it freezes out nearby enemies, and they do have to be pretty close. They can't be like, they kind of have to be inside this radius, which is like a normal dome size radius. So I still feel like Steam Vent still is more powerful because you can just spam it if you have a lot of charges on it. And then if you're worried about a stronghold boss, you can just bring one that's got a lot of damage. But I don't know. I think I'm going to end the video there. I don't think there's too much else to say about it. I think it's pretty straightforward that this is a thumbs up. It's a really good piece of gear, and I definitely recommend getting it. The thing is, it's a Cataclysm gear, so you don't have to necessarily buy this from the regular store. You can buy it from the seasonal store with crystals that you've earned through going through strongholds or whatever the weekly events are. But yeah, I'm going to end the video here. I'm Defeated Rescue, and hope to see you guys out in Bastion.